October 14, 1963. The Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. Three teenage girls collapsed during Frank Sinatra's second set. Vincent Torino watched from the wings as they convulsed on the Copa room floor. The house lights stayed down. The music kept playing, and Vinny made a choice that would haunt him for 15 years. Within 20 minutes, those girls were declared dead from heart complications. The families were paid. The newspapers buried the story on page 6, and the Nevada Gaming Commission sealed the case files. But someone kept digging. Someone remembered. And 15 years later, in a small theater in Reno, the past walked back onto Vinny's stage wearing Frank Sinatra's face and singing My Way. The night three girls died, Vinny thought he was protecting the Sands. He never imagined he was protecting a killer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The blood wouldn't come off Vinny's hands that night in '63, no matter how hard he scrubbed in the Copa Room staff washroom. Not real blood. The girls had died clean, their hearts simply stopping like switched-off radios. But he felt it there anyway, sticky and warm, as he watched the cleanup crew wheel out 3 gurneys covered in white sheets. Now, 15 years later, Vincent Torino stood behind the bar of his failing Moonlight Theater in Reno, polishing the same whiskey glass for the 3rd time while studying the contract spread across the scarred mahogany. The paper trembled slightly in the October wind that leaked through the theater's old window seals, and Vinny told himself that's why his hands were shaking. Tommy Benedetto's Sinatra Spectacular, the contract read in bold letters. 3 nights only. 50% of the door, plus expenses. Vinny had booked the tribute act 6 months ago when his accountant showed him the numbers. 2 more months of empty seats and the bank would foreclose. He'd convinced himself it was just business. A Sinatra impersonator was guaranteed to pack the house in a town full of Vegas refugees and aging dreamers. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. The theater's front door chimed, and Vinny looked up to see a lean man in his 30s walk in from the street. Even without the tuxedo and slick-back hair, there was something unsettling about how much he resembled Old Blue Eyes. The bone structure, the way he carried himself, it was like watching a ghost materialize in broad daylight. "Mr. Torino?" "Tommy Benedetto." The man's voice carried that same smooth timbre that had made Sinatra famous, though something harder lurked underneath. "I wanted to stop by before tonight's show, take a look at the stage setup." Vinny set down the glass, fighting the urge to reach for the 38 he kept under the register. Old habits from the Vegas days, when disagreements were settled with more than lawyers and paperwork. "Sure thing, kid. Stage is through here." He lifted the bar's gate and led Tommy toward the theater proper. "You been doing this long? The tribute act?" "About 15 years. Tommy's footsteps echoed in the empty lobby, past faded posters of long-forgotten productions. "Started right after high school. You could say it's been my life's work." Something in his tone made Vinny's stomach tighten. 15 years. The same amount of time since that night at the Sands. The theater's main space was modest, 200 seats sloping down toward a stage that had seen better decades. Red velvet curtains hung like dried blood in the work lights, and the smell of old cigarettes and broken dreams clung to everything. It was a far cry from the Copa Room's glitz and glamour, but it was Vinny's, clean, honest, or at least it had been until today. "Intimate venue," Tommy said, walking down the center aisle. "I like that. Makes it easier to connect with the audience, to really see their faces when—" He paused, studying the stage. "When the magic happens." Vinny watched him move, noting how Tommy's eyes lingered on the emergency exits, the sight lines from the wings, the distance between the stage and the first row. Like he was planning something. "You ever work the big rooms?" Vinny asked. "Vegas, maybe?" "Never had the pleasure. Though I've studied all the great performances from that era. The Sands especially. Some incredible shows there in the early '60s. Tommy turned, and his smile was sharp as broken glass. "I've heard you used to work Vegas yourself, Mr. Torino. Stage manager, wasn't it?" The question hit like a physical blow. Vinny's throat went dry, and for a moment he was back in the Copa Room, watching those 3 girls convulse on the floor while Sinatra kept singing and the maid men in the audience sipped their drinks like nothing was happening. That was a long time ago, Vinny managed. Not that long. October 14th, 1963, to be precise. Funny how some dates stick with you. Tommy walked to center stage, spreading his arms wide. Tell me, Mr. Torino, do you believe in justice? The kind that takes time to ripen like a good wine? The theater suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Vinny's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where the gun waited. I believe in minding my own business and honoring my contracts, he said carefully. Show starts at 8. You need anything else? Tommy's smile widened, and for just a moment, Vinny could swear he saw Frank Sinatra's ghost looking back at him. Just a good crowd tonight, Tommy said. The bigger the better. After all, some performances are worth waiting 15 years to give. The theater door slammed shut behind Tommy Benedetto with a finality that made Vinny's teeth ache. He stood frozen in the aisle for a long moment, listening to the silence settle around him like dust on a coffin lid. The work lights cast harsh shadows across the empty seats, and suddenly every corner seemed to hide watching eyes. 15 years to give a performance. The words echoed in Vinny's head as he made his way back to the bar, his legs unsteady beneath him. He poured 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he kept hidden behind the cheap whiskey, and downed it in one burning gulp. It didn't help. Nothing ever did when the memories came flooding back. The brass bell above the front door chimed again, and Vinny's hand jerked toward his gun before he saw who it was. Sarah Martinez stepped inside, shaking raindrops from her dark hair. At 24, she moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned early that the world could bite without warning. She'd been his box office manager for 2 years now, ever since she'd shown up looking for work with bruises on her wrists and terror in her eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, hanging her jacket on the coat rack by the door. Was that our headliner I passed on the street? He's got the Sinatra thing down cold. Too cold, Vinny thought, but he just nodded. Sarah didn't know about Vegas, about the Copa room, about the 3 girls who died while Sinatra's voice soared over their cooling bodies. Nobody in Reno knew. That was the whole point of running. Yeah, that was him, Tommy something. Vinny busied himself arranging bottles behind the bar, anything to keep his hands occupied. How'd the ticket sales look today? Sarah's face brightened, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in weeks. Sold out. Standing room only. Haven't seen anything like it since you opened this place. She pulled the cash box from under the register, counting bills with practiced efficiency. Whatever you're paying this guy, it's worth it. People are driving up from Vegas just to see him. From Vegas. Of course they were. The city had long tentacles and they reached everywhere eventually. That's good, Vinny said, though his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Real good. Sarah paused in her counting, studying his face with those dark eyes that saw too much. You sure you're okay? You look like you need to sit down. Before he could answer, the back door opened, and Eddie Kowalski shuffled in, bringing the smell of cigarettes and machine oil with him. Eddie had been the theater's maintenance man since before Vinny bought the place, a wiry 70-year-old who knew every pipe, wire, and loose floorboard in the building. He'd also been a sound engineer in Vegas during the golden years, though he never talked about why he'd left. Evening, boss. Sarah. Eddie nodded to them both, then fixed Vinny with a look that was pure concentration. Got the sound system checked. Everything's working smooth as silk. But I gotta ask, you sure about tonight's show? What do you mean? Eddie glanced at Sarah, then back to Vinny. Been in this business a long time. Seen a lot of performers, tribute acts, the whole 9 yards. This Benedetto kid, he shook his head. Something feels off. The way he was asking about the electrical systems, the ventilation, stuff a singer's got no business caring about. Vinny's blood turned to ice water. What kind of questions? Wanted to know about the air circulation patterns, how long it takes fresh air to cycle through the house. Asked if we had any history of audience members getting sick during shows. Eddie's weathered face creased with worry. Told him no, of course, but it's a hell of a thing for a performer to wonder about. Sarah looked between them, her expression shifting from puzzled to concerned. What are you two talking about? Why would he care about ventilation? Because 15 years ago, 3 teenage girls died in a theater while Frank Sinatra sang, and nobody ever figured out why. Because some secrets had a way of crawling out of their graves when you least expected it. because justice, according to Tommy Benedetto, was like wine. It got more potent with age. Probably nothing, Vinny lied, pouring himself another bourbon. Some performers are just particular about the technical details. But as he said it, he was remembering the way Tommy had studied the sight lines, the emergency exits, the distance from stage to audience. Like a man planning something that required precision timing and multiple escape routes. Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling the old windows and sending a chill through the theater that had nothing to do with the weather. In 3 hours, the Moonlight would be packed with 200 people expecting an evening of nostalgic entertainment. Instead, Vinny had the sinking feeling they were all walking into something much darker. He thought about canceling the show, claiming technical difficulties or food poisoning. But the contract was ironclad, and besides, running was what had gotten him into this mess in the first place. The phone's shrill ring cut through the theater's tense silence like a blade. All three of them froze, Vinny with his bourbon halfway to his lips, Sarah clutching the night's receipts, Eddie still standing by the back door with grease under his fingernails and worry etched in the lines of his face. Vinny stared at the black rotary phone behind the bar as it rang a second time, then a third. In 15 years of running the Moonlight, he'd learned to read the meaning in a phone's ring. Bill collectors called during business hours with sharp, impatient jabs at the buttons. Booking agents called with the lazy confidence of people who knew you needed them more than they needed you. But this ring, this had the weight of inevitability behind it. "You going to answer that?" Sarah asked. The fourth ring echoed through the empty theater. Vinny set down his glass and reached for the receiver, his hand steady despite the earthquake happening in his chest. Moonlight Theater. Vincent Torino. The voice on the other end wasn't asking a question. It was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of East Coast vowels that money couldn't quite polish away. "It's been a long time." Vinny's knuckles went white around the phone. He knew that voice, had heard it whisper orders in the back rooms of the Sands, had watched it smile while men disappeared into the Nevada desert. Anthony "Fat" Tony Marcello, Tommy Benedetto's father, and the man who'd given the order to bury what happened that night in 1963. "Wrong number," Vinny said, but his voice cracked on the words. A low chuckle came through the line. "Now, that's no way to greet an old friend, especially when we have so much to catch up on. My boy Tommy says he met you this afternoon, says you look good for a man carrying so much guilt." Sarah and Eddie were watching him now, concern written across their faces. Vinny turned away, pressing the receiver closer to his ear and dropping his voice to barely above a whisper. "What do you want, Tony?" "Same thing I've always wanted. Order, control, the assurance that certain embarrassing incidents remain buried where they belong." The line crackled with static, or maybe it was the sound of Vinny's world falling apart, but it seems someone's been digging where they shouldn't. Someone's been asking questions about that night at the Copa Room. Vinny's free hand found the edge of the bar and gripped it like a lifeline. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Course you don't. Just like you didn't know those 3 little girls who dropped dead while Frankie was singing The Way You Look Tonight. Funny thing about the past, Vinny, it's got a way of refusing to stay dead, especially when there are still witnesses walking around." The words hit him like a physical blow. Through the theater's front windows, he could see people starting to gather on the street outside, early arrivals for the show. Families, couples, teenagers who looked exactly like the girls who died 15 years ago. "Listen to me very carefully," Fat Tony continued, his voice dropping to that deadly whisper Vinny remembered from the bad old days. "Tonight's show is going to go exactly as planned. My boy's been preparing for this moment his entire life, and nothing and nobody is going to interfere with that. Are we clear? You can't. There are innocent people here. Kids." "Were there kids in the Copa Room that night? Didn't stop you from keeping your mouth shut then." The line went quiet for a moment, and Vinny could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "You made a choice 15 years ago, Vinny. You chose to live with blood on your hands rather than die with a clean conscience. Tonight, you get to live with the consequences." The line went dead. Vinny stood frozen with the receiver in his hand, listening to the dial tone while his past crashed down around him like a demolished building. Behind him, he could hear Sarah's voice calling his name, Eddie asking if everything was all right, but their words seemed to come from very far away. He hung up the phone with mechanical precision and turned to face them. Sarah's eyes were wide with worry, Eddie's narrow with suspicion. Outside, the crowd was growing larger, people streaming toward the theater's entrance with anticipation lighting their faces. "Vinny?" Sarah stepped closer, her voice gentle. "What's going on? Who was that?" He looked at her, this girl who'd trusted him with her safety, who'd built a new life in the shelter of his broken-down theater, and felt something crack open in his chest. For 15 years he'd told himself he'd escaped. That Reno was far enough, small enough, clean enough to wash the blood from his hands. But the past had found him anyway, wearing Frank Sinatra's face and carrying his father's sins. The theater door chimed as the first customers of the evening pushed inside, chattering excitedly about the show. In 2 hours, Tommy Benedetto would take the stage. And if Fat Tony was right, history was about to repeat itself. Only this time, Vinny wouldn't be able to run. "Just a business call," Vinny said, but the words came out strangled, unconvincing even to his own ears. He watched Sarah's face shift from concern to something deeper, the kind of wariness that came from surviving too many lies from too many men who claimed to care about her safety. Eddie stepped forward, his work boots creaking on the old floorboards. "Boss, that didn't sound like any business call I ever heard. You look like you're about to throw up." The first wave of customers had pushed through the front door, bringing with them the October chill and the excited chatter of people anticipating a good show. A middle-aged couple argued quietly about their seat assignments. 2 teenage girls giggled over a shared program, their faces bright with the kind of innocent excitement that made Vinny's chest tighten with dread. "I'm fine," he insisted, moving around the bar to straighten programs that didn't need straightening. Adjust rope barriers that were already perfectly aligned. Just pre-show nerves. You know how it is. But Sarah wasn't buying it. She'd learned to read the signs of dangerous men during her years before the moonlight. And now she was watching Vinny with the same careful attention she might give a growling dog. Pre-show nerves don't make you go white as a sheet. What aren't you telling us? More people streamed through the entrance, a family with 3 young children, an elderly man in a worn suit that had probably been expensive once, a group of college students already half drunk and singing Sinatra lyrics off key. The lobby was filling up, voices echoing off the high ceiling, and Vinny felt trapped among them like an animal in a cage. "Eddie," he said suddenly, his voice sharper than intended, "I want you to check the ventilation system again. Make sure everything's running clean." Eddie's bushy eyebrows drew together. "Already told you, everything's working fine. Why would—" "Just check it again." The words came out as a bark, loud enough to make several customers turn and stare. Vinny forced his voice back to normal. "Please, I want to be sure." Sarah was studying him now with those dark eyes that had learned to spot trouble from a mile away. "Vinny, you're scaring me. What's really going on?" He wanted to tell her, wanted to grab her by the shoulders and explain about the Copa room, about 3 girls who died for no reason anyone could understand, about Tommy Benedetto's smile that was too sharp and his questions that cut too deep. He wanted to shout for everyone to leave, to run, to get as far away from the Moonlight Theater as their legs could carry them. Instead, he straightened his tie and pasted on the smile he'd perfected during 15 years of pretending to be someone else. "Nothing's going on. Tonight's going to be great. Sold-out show, good money, happy customers. What more could we want?" But even as he said it, his eyes were scanning the crowd, cataloging faces, looking for signs of... what? He wasn't even sure. All he knew was that Tommy Benedetto had been asking about ventilation and air circulation, the same kinds of details that might matter if you were planning to introduce something into a closed space full of people. Eddie hadn't moved toward the back room to check the ventilation. He stood rooted in place, his weathered face creased with the kind of concern that came from decades in the entertainment business. "You know what? I think I'm going to stick around for the show tonight. Haven't done that in a while. You don't need to—" "Yeah, I do." Eddie's voice was firm. "Got a feeling about tonight, can't shake it." Sarah moved closer, lowering her voice so the customers couldn't hear. "This is about that phone call, isn't it? Who was it, Vinny? What did they want?" Through the front windows, Vinny could see more people approaching, a steady stream of Sinatra fans and curious locals drawn by the promise of a good show. In an hour, every seat would be filled. In 2 hours, Tommy Benedetto would take the stage, and whatever he had planned would unfold in front of 200 innocent people who just wanted an evening of entertainment. Someone from the old days, Vinny admitted finally. Someone who should have stayed buried. The admission hung in the air between them like smoke. Sarah's face went pale, and Eddie made a sound deep in his throat that might have been understanding or might have been fear. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered. Vinny looked at her, then at Eddie, then at the growing crowd of customers who trusted him to give them a safe, enjoyable evening. For 15 years he'd run from his past. Now it had cornered him in his own theater, surrounded by people he'd learned to care about despite himself. "We survive," he said quietly. "Whatever happens tonight, we survive." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of forced normalcy that felt like drowning in slow motion. Vinny moved through the lobby like a man sleepwalking, taking tickets, directing customers to their seats, making small talk about the weather while his mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. Each new face that walked through the door might be an innocent theater patron, or they might be part of whatever Tommy Benedetto had planned. Sarah worked beside him, but he could feel her watching him with growing alarm. She'd grown skilled at reading the subtle signs of impending violence. The way men's voices changed when they were lying, how their eyes shifted when they were planning something that would hurt someone else. Now those same instincts were screaming warnings about the man she'd trusted for 2 years. "Vinny," she said quietly as they moved behind the concession stand, "I need you to listen to me. Whatever happened in your past, whatever you're afraid of tonight, we can handle it. But not if you keep lying to us." He wanted to tell her that some lies were the only thing standing between innocent people and unspeakable consequences. Instead, he found himself studying the crowd with new eyes, looking for details he'd missed before. The middle-aged couple arguing about seats, the woman kept glancing toward the emergency exits. The elderly man in the worn suit had positioned himself near the back of the theater with a clear view of both the stage and the main entrance. The college students weren't as drunk as they'd seemed. Their movements were too controlled, too aware. "How many of these people do you recognize?" Vinny asked suddenly. Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "Most of them are regulars or... No, I mean really recognize. From the neighborhood, from other shows. People you've seen before tonight." She scanned the lobby, her expression growing troubled. "Maybe half? Why would..." Her voice cut off as understanding dawned. "You think some of them aren't really here for the show?" Before Vinny could answer, Eddie appeared from the back hallway, his face grim. "Check the ventilation like you asked. System's running clean, but I found something else." He pulled a small object from his pocket, a device about the size of a cigarette pack with wires trailing from one end. This was taped inside the main air intake. "Looks like some kind of timer mechanism." The lobby noise faded to a distant hum as Vinny stared at the device. He'd seen similar contraptions in Vegas, back when the mob needed to ensure certain meetings remained private or certain witnesses stayed permanently quiet. Simple, effective, and virtually untraceable if you knew what you were doing. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, but her voice already carried the weight of someone who suspected the answer would be terrible. "Insurance," Vinny said flatly. "Tommy's making sure tonight goes exactly as planned." He looked up at Eddie. "How long before it activates?" Eddie examined the timer with the careful attention of someone who'd spent decades working with delicate machinery. "Hard to say without knowing what it's designed to trigger. But based on the settings..." He paused, his face going pale. "Maybe an hour and a half at most. Right around the time Tommy would take the stage for his second set. When the audience would be settled in, relaxed, completely unaware that they were breathing whatever this device had been designed to release into the theater's air supply." Sarah grabbed Vinny's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "We have to call the police. Clear the building. Cancel the show." "Can't." The words came out harsher than he intended. "You don't understand what we're dealing with. These people don't leave loose ends and they don't forgive interference. We try to shut this down and Tommy disappears. The device disappears. And 6 months from now, something worse happens to a lot more people. So what?" Sarah's voice rose dangerously. "We just let it happen? Let whatever this is kill innocent people?" Vinny looked around the lobby at the faces of people who'd trusted him enough to spend their Friday evening in his theater. The teenage girls who reminded him painfully of Rebecca Martinez and Karen Chen and Lisa Morrison. 3 names he'd carried like stones in his chest for 15 years. The families who'd dressed up for a special night out. The elderly couples holding hands and remembering when Sinatra's voice had soundtracked their youth. "No," he said quietly, "we don't let it happen. But we're smart about how we stop it." He turned to Eddie. "Can you disable that thing without triggering it?" Eddie studied the device again, turning it carefully in his weathered hands. "Maybe. But if I'm wrong, if there's a failsafe I don't see—" He shrugged grimly. "Could set off whatever it's supposed to set off right now instead of later." The choice hung between them like a blade. Risk everything on Eddie's ability to disarm a device none of them fully understood, or find another way to save 200 people from becoming collateral damage in a 15-year-old vendetta. Through the lobby windows, Vinny could see Tommy Benedetto approaching the theater's entrance, his face composed and confident. Behind him walked 3 men in expensive suits who definitely weren't there for the music. Time was running out, and every choice led deeper into darkness. "Mr. Torino." Tommy Benedetto's voice cut through the lobby chatter like a blade through silk. He stood in the entrance with those 3 suited men flanking him, but something had changed in his demeanor since the afternoon. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by the predatory confidence of someone who no longer needed to pretend. Vinny slipped the device into his pocket and stepped forward, acutely aware of Sarah and Eddie behind him, of the innocent customers flowing around them like water around stones. "Tommy, ready for the show?" "Oh, I'm ready." Tommy's smile was his father's smile, sharp enough to cut glass. "Been ready for 15 years, 3 months, and 12 days. That's how long it's been since you helped murder my mother." The words hit Vinny like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, felt Eddie go rigid. The lobby seemed to tilt, voices becoming distant echoes as pieces of a puzzle he'd never known existed suddenly snapped into place. "Your mother." The words came out as a whisper. Rebecca Martinez, 17 years old, went to see Frank Sinatra at the Sands with her 2 best friends on October 15, 1963. Tommy stepped closer, his voice conversational, intimate. "You remember Rebecca, don't you, Vinny? Pretty girl, dark hair, had her whole life ahead of her until you decided it was more important to protect Fat Tony's investment than call an ambulance." The lobby spun around Vinny as 15 years of carefully constructed lies crumbled. Rebecca Martinez hadn't been some random teenager. She'd been a real person with a family, with a son who'd grown up knowing his mother was murdered and that the man responsible had walked away clean. "You were just a baby," Vinny managed. "How could you—" "My grandmother raised me, told me everything. How my mother saved up for months to buy that dress, how excited she was to see Sinatra, how she and her friends started convulsing during The Way You Look Tonight, and nobody called for help until it was too late." Tommy's voice never rose above normal conversation level, but each word landed like a hammer blow. "Granny made me promise I'd find the truth someday. Find the men responsible." Sarah moved closer to Vinny's side. "What is he talking about? What happened in Vegas?" Tommy laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Oh, he never told you? Vincent Torino, pillar of the community, never mentioned that he used to work for the mob? That he helped cover up the murder of 3 teenage girls because calling the police would have been bad for business?" "It wasn't murder," Vinny said desperately. "It was an accident. Some kind of poison gas leak or—" "Bullshit." The profanity cracked like a whip. "You know what killed them, Vinny. The same thing that's going to kill everyone in this theater tonight, unless you finally tell the truth." The device in Vinny's pocket seemed to burn against his leg. Around them, customers continued their cheerful conversations, completely unaware that they were standing in the middle of a 15-year-old reckoning. "Those girls didn't die from a gas leak," Tommy continued. "They died because Fat Tony was field testing a new kind of assassination tool, something that could clear a room without leaving obvious traces. My mother and her friends were just practice targets." The final piece clicked into place with sickening clarity. The mysterious collapses, the order to keep quiet, the way Fat Tony had seemed more concerned with studying the aftermath than covering it up. It hadn't been an accident at all. It had been an experiment, and those 3 girls had been laboratory rats. "And tonight," Tommy said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "you get to watch it happen again. Only this time, instead of 3 teenagers, it'll be 200 people. Men, women, children. All dying because Vincent Torino still can't find the courage to do the right thing." Sarah grabbed Vinny's arm. "He's insane. We call the police right now." But Tommy shook his head with mock sadness. "The device is already active. My father's people are positioned throughout the building. You try to evacuate, try to call for help, and we trigger it immediately instead of waiting for showtime. Either way, these people die. The only question is whether you want to watch them suffer." The casual cruelty of it, the mathematical precision with which Tommy had planned this moment, took Vinny's breath away. This wasn't just revenge. It was a systematic dismantling of everything he'd tried to build, everyone he'd learned to care about. "What do you want?" Vinny asked, though he already knew the answer would destroy him. Tommy's smile widened, revealing teeth as white and sharp as his father's. "I want you to confess. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Tell them what you did to my mother. Tell them who you really are." The choice crystallized with brutal clarity: his reputation and freedom, or the lives of 200 innocent people. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. Around them, the lobby buzzed with innocent conversations, complaints about the October cold, excitement about the show, the mundane chatter of people who had no idea they were standing in the middle of a 15-year reckoning. Vinny could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could feel Sarah's grip tightening on his arm as she waited for him to do something, anything, to pull them back from the edge of catastrophe. "You think this makes you noble?" Vinny's voice came out steadier than he felt. "Killing innocent people to settle a score with me?" Tommy's expression didn't change. "I think it makes me my mother's son. She died because you chose silence over justice. Now you get to make the same choice again, except this time you'll live with the consequences. These people have nothing to do with what happened in Vegas." Neither did Rebecca. Tommy stepped closer, close enough that Vinny could smell his cologne, expensive, predatory. Neither did Karen Chen or Lisa Morrison. But they died anyway, because Vincent Torino decided his job was more important than their lives. The names hit like physical blows. Vinny hadn't heard them spoken aloud in 15 years, had buried them so deep that sometimes he could almost pretend they'd never existed. But here they were, resurrected in the mouth of a dead girl's son, sharp as broken glass. Sarah was looking between them with growing horror. "Vinny, whatever he's talking about, we can fix this. We can—" "No," Tommy interrupted, his voice gentle now, almost kind. "You can't fix this, sweetheart. Your boss isn't the man you think he is. Vincent Torino died in Vegas in 1963. The man you work for is just a ghost wearing his face." Eddie had been silent through the exchange, but now he shifted his weight, and Vinny caught the subtle movement of the older man's hand toward the device in his own pocket. Smart, practical Eddie, already thinking 3 moves ahead, already calculating angles and risks. "Don't," Vinny said quietly, not looking at him. "Not yet." Tommy noticed the exchange and smiled. "Ah, the cavalry wants to charge. How touching. Tell me, Eddie, that's your name, right? How good are you with timer mechanisms? Specifically, ones rigged with mercury switches that trigger if you move them too quickly." Eddie's face went gray, but his voice stayed steady. "Good enough. I hope so, because if you're wrong, if you make one tiny mistake," Tommy gestured around the crowded lobby, "well, at least it'll be quick." A family with young children pushed past them, the father juggling tickets and a diaper bag, while the mother corralled twin boys who couldn't have been more than 6. The sight of them, so normal, so innocent, made something crack inside Vinny's chest. "What exactly do you want me to say?" The words felt like glass in his throat. "The truth. All of it." Tommy pulled out a small recording device, the kind that could pick up conversations across a crowded room. "I want you to tell everyone here exactly what happened on October 15th, 1963. I want you to explain how Fat Tony Benedetto used my mother and her friends as test subjects for a new kind of weapon, and I want you to take responsibility for letting him get away with it. And if I do that, then these people go home to their families tonight, instead of to the morgue. Sarah was shaking now, her face pale but her voice fierce. "He's lying, Vinny. Even if you confess, he'll still—" "No, he won't." Vinny looked at Tommy, seeing past the performer's facade to the grieving son underneath. "Because this isn't really about revenge, it's about truth. Isn't that right, Tommy? You need people to know what really happened to your mother. You need the world to remember Rebecca Martinez." Something flickered in Tommy's eyes, surprise maybe, or recognition. "You think you understand me? I think you've been carrying your mother's ghost for 15 years, same as I have. I think you're tired of being the only one who remembers her name." The recording device was still running, red light blinking like a tiny heartbeat. Around them, the lobby was beginning to thin as customers moved toward their seats, eager for the show to begin. Soon the theater would be full, and Tommy's timeline would shift into its final phase. "The difference between us," Tommy said softly, "is that I'm willing to do something about it." Vinny closed his eyes for a moment, seeing Rebecca Martinez as she'd been that night. 17, beautiful, excited about seeing Sinatra. She deserved so much more than becoming a footnote in Fat Tony's experiments. They all had. When he opened his eyes again, his decision was made. "You're right," Vinny said, his voice carrying across the lobby with sudden, terrible clarity. Rebecca Martinez deserved better than silence. He stepped forward, past Tommy's recording device, past Sarah's desperate grip on his arm, past 15 years of carefully constructed lies. The lobby conversations began to fade as people sensed the shift in atmosphere, the weight of something important happening. "My name is Vincent Torino," he announced, his voice growing stronger. 15 years ago, I was the stage manager at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. On October 15, 1963, 3 teenage girls died during a Frank Sinatra concert under my watch. Rebecca Martinez, Karen Chen, and Lisa Morrison. The lobby fell completely silent now. Customers turned toward him, faces confused, concerned. Sarah was shaking her head, tears starting in her eyes. Eddie stood frozen, hands still hovering near the device. "I was told it was a gas leak," Vinny continued, each word deliberate, final. "I was told to keep quiet, to let the hotel handle it. But it wasn't a leak. Those girls were murdered, killed by a chemical weapon being tested by Anthony Fat Tony Benedetto, and I helped cover it up." Tommy's face showed a complex mixture of satisfaction and something deeper, relief maybe. The recording device continued its silent work, capturing every word. "I was 26 years old and scared of losing my job, scared of what would happen if I crossed the mob. So I stayed quiet while 3 families buried their daughters without ever knowing the truth. I stayed quiet while the man responsible walked free." The crowd was pressing closer now, drawn by the raw confession, the weight of genuine remorse. Vinny saw the family with twin boys, saw the teenage girls who'd reminded him of Rebecca, saw all the faces that had become precious to him over 2 years of running this small theater. "Rebecca Martinez was 17 years old," he said, looking directly at Tommy. "She'd saved money from her job at a department store to buy a blue dress for the concert. She loved Sinatra's voice because her father had played his records when she was little. She wanted to be a teacher." Tommy's composure cracked slightly. "How do you—" "Because I found out everything about them afterward, about all 3 girls. Rebecca, who collected books and dreamed of traveling to Europe. Karen, who played violin and tutored younger kids in math. Lisa, who was planning to study nursing because she wanted to help people." Vinny's voice broke. "I learned their names, their dreams, their lives, because I needed to carry that weight, because someone had to remember them as more than just casualties." The silence in the lobby was absolute now. Even the men Tommy had brought with him seemed transfixed by the raw pain in Vinny's voice. "But remembering isn't enough," Vinny continued, "and neither is revenge." He looked around at the crowd, at Sarah's tear-streaked face, at Eddie's grim determination. Rebecca Martinez didn't die so her son could perpetuate the cycle. She died because good people chose silence over courage. She died because I chose silence over courage. Tommy raised the recording device higher. "You think a speech absolves you?" "No, nothing absolves me. But maybe—" Vinny reached into his pocket and pulled out the timer device. holding it up where everyone could see it. Maybe I can finally choose courage. Gasps echoed through the lobby. People started backing away, but Vinny raised his voice. Everyone needs to leave, now, calmly, quickly. This building isn't safe. The crowd began moving toward the exits, but Vinny saw Tommy's men shifting position, blocking escape routes. Tommy himself was shaking his head. Too late for evacuation, Vinny. My people are in position. You try to clear the building and we trigger it remotely. Then I guess we do this the hard way. Vinny looked at Eddie. How confident are you? Eddie stepped forward, extending his hand for the device. Confident enough. But it was Sarah who moved first, snatching the timer from Vinny's hand before either man could react. You two have done enough damage for one night. Sarah, don't. She was already examining the device, her fingers tracing the wires with unexpected expertise. You think you're the only one with secrets? I worked end of day in the army before I came here. If this is what I think it is, her fingers moved with practiced precision, isolating circuits, identifying the mercury switch Tommy had mentioned. Around them, the crowd was pressing toward exits that Tommy's men were subtly but firmly blocking. Sarah, Tommy said, his voice carrying new urgency. You don't understand. That device is... She looked up at him with cold fury. It's a simple dispersal trigger. Crude work. Your father's people weren't as clever as they thought. Her fingers found the right wire. Rebecca Martinez deserved justice. Not this. The red light on the timer flickered once, then went dark. Tommy stared at the dead device, his carefully orchestrated revenge crumbling. You can't just... This isn't how it ends. Yes, Vinny said quietly. It is. The silence that followed was different from before. Not the electric tension of confrontation, but the hollow quiet of deflation. Tommy's men looked to him for direction, but their leader seemed frozen, staring at the dead device in Sarah's hands as if it contained the last 15 years of his life. It's over, Tommy, Vinny said gently. The police are already on their way. It was a lie, but Eddie caught the cue and had his phone out, fingers moving. The crowd continued their exodus, no longer blocked, voices rising in confused chatter as they spilled onto the October street. Tommy's laugh came out broken, raw. Over? You think it's over because you finally said her name out loud? He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, the Sinatra facade cracking like old paint. I spent 15 years planning this. 15 years learning everything about you, about this place, about the people you care about. I know, Vinny said, and I'm sorry. The simple words seemed to hit Tommy harder than any accusation. He stumbled backward, bumping into one of his men, who steadied him with surprising gentleness. Sorry doesn't bring her back, Tommy whispered. Sorry doesn't give me the mother I never had. Sarah was carefully dismantling the device completely now, her military training evident in every precise movement. No, she said without looking up, but neither does murder. Your mother wouldn't have wanted this. You didn't know her. Neither did you. The words came from Eddie, who'd finished his call and was watching Tommy with something that might have been compassion. You were just a baby. Everything you think you know about her came from someone else's grief. Tommy's composure finally shattered completely. The smooth performer disappeared, leaving behind a broken man who'd spent his entire adult life chasing a ghost. She was everything. She was supposed to come home that night and sing me to sleep. Instead, I got a phone call and a funeral I was too young to understand. Vinny stepped closer, ignoring the way Tommy's men tensed. Rebecca sounds like she was a wonderful mother, but she wouldn't have wanted you to destroy yourself for her memory. How would you know? Because I've been carrying her ghost for 15 years too, and Karen's and Lisa's. They visit me every night, asking why I didn't speak up sooner, but they've never once asked me to hurt innocent people in their names. The lobby was nearly empty now, just the core group and a few stragglers who seemed unable to look away from the human wreckage playing out before them. In the distance, sirens wailed. Eddie's call had been real after all. Tommy heard them too. He straightened, some semblance of dignity returning to his posture. I suppose you'll testify? About Vegas, about what Fat Tony did? Yes, Vinny said without hesitation. I should have done it 15 years ago. It won't be enough. The statute of limitations, Lack of evidence. Jurisdictional issues. Maybe. But their names will be in the record. Rebecca Martinez, Karen Chen, Lisa Morrison. People will know they existed, know they mattered. Something shifted in Tommy's expression, a fraction of the rage bleeding away. Granny always said that was the worst part, that everyone forgot her like she'd never been born. The sirens were closer now, red and blue lights painting the lobby windows. Tommy's men were getting nervous, shifting toward the back exit, but their leader made no move to run. "I used to practice her favorite songs," Tommy said quietly. "The ones Granny said she hummed while she rocked me to sleep. I thought if I could sing them well enough, loud enough, maybe she'd hear me somehow." "She did," Sarah said, finally looking up from the completely dismantled device. "Every performance, every note. That's why you could sing them so beautifully, because they came from love, not hate." The police burst through the front entrance then, weapons drawn, voices sharp with authority. Tommy raised his hands slowly, his men following suit. But as the officers moved to surround them, Tommy looked back at Vinny one last time. "Will you visit her grave when this is all over?" Vinny nodded, his throat too tight for words. "Tell her." Tommy paused as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Tell her I'm sorry, that I lost my way for a while, but I remember now. I remember she was more than just a victim." As they led him away, Vinny heard him humming something soft and familiar. "The Way You Look Tonight," but transformed, gentle now instead of mocking. A lullaby for a mother he'd never really known, sung by the son who'd finally learned how to honor her memory. The October wind swept through the open doors, carrying the last notes away into the darkness, and Vinny understood that some endings weren't about justice or redemption. Sometimes they were simply about letting go of the ghosts that had haunted you both.